Hi, Dave Sheehan from The Connect Show. In this upcoming episode, I'll be speaking with Heidi Hadley, who was originally from the UK as a neurophysiologist and now has retrained up into natural therapies and resides in Adelaide. Looking forward to this interview. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've moved a little bit further up the chain now. We're going to look at the hip, and I'm going to introduce you to, once again, another one of Stu's favourite areas. Okay, this is all about ungluing the gluteus minimus muscle from the TFL. Okay, so we're talking about the anterior fibres of glute minimus and the posterior fibres of TFL. So it is just one of those beautiful little areas where hypertensity starts to form, and for me it is a game-changing area. Now I have a couple of really game-changing areas around the hip. For those of you that are familiar with my hip protocol, then by all means check it out. There's a couple of areas around the hip which are extraordinarily important in terms of unlocking these restrictions. Now, just every now and then when you get these hip restrictions in, it is so important to address some of these areas. Now this is one of these areas, okay? And I'm going to show you it because this is one of my tricks of the trade, if you like, okay? Now we don't need a huge amount of cream in this area, okay? So we don't need a real slippery cream. So it's important that when we are using the cream that we don't put too much, because we want to engage this tissue just right. And we want to do this safely, and we want to do it effectively as well. And that's what we're doing. So side lying here with James. So we're talking again, once again, the TFL, and then basically if we just come back off the TFL, we'll be in that sort of glute minimus area, the anterior fibres there. So once again, this will be a broad approach. This will be a slow approach, but it is a little game changer, okay? So I'm going to start up in the superior portion and we're going to work our way down, and I'm going to work across. So it is a broad approach. Once again, we've got a little bit of cream already involved here. We're using, again, the fleshy part of our forearm, okay? So we're going to sink in, and I'm going to be working posterior to anterior. And as I go anteriorly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be dragging the tissue down and locking down onto the edge of the TFL, the posterior fibres of the TFL, and then I'm just going to add a shear force. Okay. Now I do this a lot with my athletes, and with some of the more experienced athletes, what we do is we can actually introduce a little bit of movement. So sometimes I'll be able to just bring them into a little bit of extension, a little bit of flexion, a little bit of adduction, and we just move through that process. And it's not huge movements, it's just small, subtle movements we need to do as we work through that tissue there. So as again you can see, the speed that I'm working, there is a fair chance as you come and roll onto the TFL itself at that superior portion, you will come face to face with the trigger point in that area, and that is a deadly little trigger point. So just be careful, mindful of your pressure, make sure that you're checking in with your client and that they can accept that. All right, so working down and over. All right, come down. We're going to pick up the next section just underneath there. It is exactly the same process again. So we're coming down, locking on, and then applying a shear force. So it's perfect, so don't let the force off. Make sure that your client's happy. They're good. Yeah, James is good. Yep, that pressure's okay. If I find him pushing against me, then I know I'm going too far. Once again, if you like, you can introduce a little bit of extension, a little bit of flexion, adduction, working across like so. And we just move down and pick up. And basically the ending point for this will be, you will end up at the superior portion of your greater trochanter, and then you'll know that's about as far as you want to go. So it's only a small little section there. So we're locking in, coming in. My body weight is coming over. That is the pressure, so nothing's coming through my shoulder, okay? It's all from my body weight, so it's effective and it's safe and blend off. And that's the sort of speed you want to be doing, okay? So that is the little ungluing of TFL and glute medius and minimus together.
Hi everyone at home, Dave Sheehan from The Connect Show. In today's show, we have Heidi Hadley. Welcome, Heidi.
Hello.
Now, Heidi, you've been around the traps a little bit with our association for some time. You've run a number of different events, both face-to-face and also virtually, but I don't think you've probably taught all 9,000 plus members. So for those that haven't met you, can you give just a little bit of a background on why you're here today?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So basically, if we go right back in a time machine, go back over 20 years ago, I lived in the UK and I specialised and trained in the area of neurophysiology. So I worked within the National Health Service and I was involved with lots of diagnostic investigations. So people with any neurological problems and epilepsy and we all know these neuromuscular issues. So that was really my start of having this passion for the muscles and the nervous system. And then there's one day that really dawned on me, and I used to go into theatre with the surgeon and also with the consultant neurophysiologist, because we'd get patients in whose anti-epileptic drugs just didn't work for them. And so after lots and lots of therapy, what they would do is we'd take them into surgery. The surgeon would cut open that bit of the skull, they'd lift the skull out, and then I had the disposable electrodes and I put them on that part of the brain where we'd done lots of investigation to finalise and confirm that that's where that epileptic discharge came from. And then
fascinating,
they'd cut that bit out, take that bit out, and the patient would hopefully be better. But it was that day, I always remember that day, the first time I looked at that brain and I was like, wow, that thing controls everything. And it was after that I started then looking more into the natural therapies. And a patient told me once when I was seeing him for an EEG that he had natural therapies for counteracting side effects of drugs. And basically, Dave, I went to one of the consultants and I said to him, have you heard of all these different therapies? And he looked at me and he went, oh, it's quackery. Well, you say something like that to me and I'm more likely to think I'm going to research this, because that's purely ignorance when someone talks like that. It's a lack of information. So I literally went off and studied part-time while I had my full-time job. And then when I got my number of therapies under my belt, I left for my full-time job, had a part-time job in a health food shop because I knew that was my demographic, and then started building my business up. And so then we left England in 2010. And then we emigrated to South Australia in 2010, and I have a wellness centre here now as well. So we've built it up again.
So it's, obviously what you're talking about would resonate very much with the membership, in that you're bringing pure science across into complementary medicine, I guess, to an extent. Yeah, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing, is that I'm sure everyone agrees that when we work with our clients, it's not about just fixing them. That's the old mindset, isn't it? It's less about fixing, it's about facilitating them, educating them, empowering them so that they actually feel that they have control. Because I'm sure you've seen this, Dave, and everyone that's listening, is that people go through the system, don't they? And we often see them when they're going through that system and they've been given different labels and they've got disempowering stories and accounts to do with, say, back pain. And so it's actually psychologically, things start to shift and change as well, which impacts on their body. And, we know that when we get a client on the table, the floodgates open, they just release everything, don't they? So they talk as well as everything else. And it's sometimes the only time that people actually stop and listen to them. The rest of the time, they're just a number, or they're just somebody on a clinic list. So it's actually good.
Yeah, and just before we came to air, Heidi, you were talking about how you were running a webinar about 3 weeks ago, and you heard the chatter in the I guess it would be like a virtual lobby. People were already talking before you came on to present, and tell the folks at home what was going on, that vibe, because it sort of reflects what you were just saying. Yeah,
sure. So that was about 3 Sundays ago now, and this was in Adelaide. So it was our first workshop where we were all together in person since the whole
it was in person.
Yeah. So what happened was people were walking in and you could just feel the energy and the vibe, and there was this, people were pleased to be together, but there was a real zapping of that energy. And I just watched, so I just observed the body language and the intention and everything that was going on in their conversations before we started. And it was almost like a bit of a therapy session, because this is the first time a lot of sole traders have got together and they started talking. So I had all my slides for the neuromyofascial web and somatic movement ready, but I kind of flipped it. I still used the slides, I still made it relevant, but then I also brought in how the muscles and the fascia are influenced by our emotional mental health as well. And we used it as a way to, and I brought this to them, that we need to recenter and recalibrate really to be fully present for our clients, because we've all been triggered over these months. And unless we actually start to reset our central nervous system, we can project a lot of that anxiety subconsciously at times on our clients. And so in order to give us more energy emotionally and mentally and physically, we need to kind of just dial down that stress response. And that's what I found. And by the end of that day, there was a lot of emotional release, because when we do somatics, we're kind of releasing a lot of that deep repressed trauma and emotion that we kind of hold down to put our public face on and say that everything's fine, you know.
So you're talking about a real life situation there with the class. So let's backtrack slightly, and the definition of somatics for you, as far as what you're talking about, just so everyone at home can sort of get a better understanding of what you're talking about.
Sure. So with somatics, it's a massive subject, but I like to use one little statement, and it's somatics is mindful movement to release chronically tight muscles. And so if you kind of break that statement up, if you think of the word mindful movement, everyone's heard of mindfulness because it's the in word now, you know, everyone's putting it on because it's a great bit of marketing. But the reality is, if we were to dissect that word mindful, it's actually, mindfulness is about an internalized process. It's becoming aware of our internal environment again, so that we have, like we've already mentioned, the skills, the education in order to recenter and recalibrate. So what's happening, though, unfortunately, is that this mindful movement is being tagged onto lots of things where people start looking externally at the external world and comparing themselves to other people. Maybe it's because they do eye-watering back bends, or they do something that they think they've got to copy that. But in actual fact, it's about coming back to who we are, looking at our bone structure, our history, our emotional makeup, who we are that's brought us to today. So that's where the mindful part comes into somatics. And then the other part, so it's got mindful movement to release chronically tight muscles. Again, Dave, if I was to say to you, if I could teach you a few movements that could release chronically tight muscles, how would that make you feel? I mean, what would you think if you had a few skills to do that? And I know you've got loads of skills, so you could anyway. But
well, no, I'd be very much, I'd very much enjoy that. So why don't you engage that thought with the folks at home?
Yeah, sure. And that's the thing, is that if you're listening, if you actually knew of those skills, what would you feel? I mean, if you were to roll over in bed at 2 a.m. and your back went out and you thought, oh no, what's happened? Sometimes we can catastrophize. If we've got a story or something that's linked to that back pain, we can lie there in bed and ruminate during the night and think, oh, what's going on? Whereas if we've actually got some education and we've got a skill set, we can lie there in bed, use some of the techniques that I teach within somatics to actually dial down the stress response, quieten down that catastrophizing in your head, which translates into very tight muscles in your body. And then you can do some very small somatic movements to soften and release that cramping or that tension. And so what that does, again, it brings us out of this thing called the authoritarian mindset, which in psychology we look at, and you can see it with people, don't you, that they put all the accountability and the onus on a practitioner or someone else. And we know clients that do that. Whereas what we want to do is actually bring that ownership back. And that's a healthier mindset to be in. And to be fair, people might go, well, I'll lose my recurring clients, you know, my regular income. You don't. You actually find that they talk. Word of mouth is so powerful for marketing. And what you find is then that people come to you because they know they can get some answers from you, rather than feeling that they're just money, you know. So we actually want to show that we're very caring, very holistic and nurturing.
So to come to one of your workshops, for instance, then you're not just simply learning techniques, but you're learning how better to communicate with your clientele. That's what you're saying. And to, in some ways, educate them to then take those little bags of tricks home with them to better analyze where they are with movement and pain.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that over the years, I've done my clinical somatics training, but then I've done neuropsychology training, and I've done other courses as well. So all these courses come together because when you do somatics, and in the early days, people think it's just about movement. But, you know, it's not just about movement. It's about listening to the intention of someone looking. Like what I do is you body read them. You can look at their central nervous system. You can see how their central nervous system is operating as soon as they walk in the door, because our brain will hold and pattern muscle tension in specific ways. And once you understand this, and I teach this in the workshops, once you understand the way that the brain will hold them, you get a really good insight not only into what kind of stress pattern they're holding, but how their mindset works and the kind of limiting beliefs that they have. And when you've got that, you can use skills and techniques and open questions, you know, to get them to use the reasoning parts of their brain to sense and feel what's going on within.
Sounds fascinating. And so the workshops are normally over 2 days, are they?
They can be over 2 days. I usually just do them for MMA. I do them in a day. But I for other things, you know, other times I've done them for over 2 days, because by the end of the day, like when I see everyone for MMA, you get such a brain workout that people realize that you do these really small movements. But this is where it's changing, thinking that we're working smarter, not harder. Because once you work with your nervous system and your brain, the way your brain tells the muscles to stay tight, when we change the way that the language or the software up here is translating to your muscles, you don't have to work hard. And that's why it works brilliantly with people with chronic pain, because if you're in chronic pain, you're terrified to actually move too much. So so that's why it can be over 2 days, but with MMA I've just been doing it at the moment for a day.
Okay, fair enough. And where we are at the moment with COVID floating around still, and it sounds like it will be for quite some time, the ability to, well, we all know that pain can manifest in tight muscles. I assume you would be teaching can manifest from the mental state into the physical. That's what you're talking about. So now is probably a really great time to sort of talk more and more about that. I think we're doing some webinars as well with you. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've done a few already this year in 2020, and then I have another webinar which will be in October. So I'm actually going to be talking about psychoneuroimmunology and looking at that side of things, because I think it's really good for the practitioners to be skilled up and to actually know this sort of stuff. We work so hard, don't we, all of us, with our professional development to make sure that we're looking at all aspects. And I just think this is so topical now, because a lot of the things that we're seeing with our clients, there's a huge shift, and that huge shift psychologically is bringing a whole new set of intense tight muscles to our clinic.
Okay, and I certainly feel it here, because I mean, we're still in lockdown here in Melbourne at the moment. When this goes to air, I'm hoping that we won't be. But it's I've never had a situation personally where you become so aware about your mental wellness having an effect on so many things on a physical level, and that could be just simply wanting to sleep more, feeling sluggish, those sorts of things that a lot of people that I speak to in my situation are also feeling. And exercise and those sorts of things are really, or they help me, that's for sure. But it's that whole, I guess we're living in that sort of world at the moment where what you're talking about is incredibly relevant.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Dave, because in somatics, we talk about our whole being as a soma. So we say that you can't separate your mind and your body, and we all know this now, you know, for the 2020 that we've had, you can't separate it. If you've got something going on in your head, it translates and creates physiological symptoms. We see that. If you've got something going on physiologically, it messes with your headspace. So in somatics, we say that we're a soma, and a soma is a giant sensory organism that's absorbing everything. So it's from our belief systems to the conditioning that we get around us, the fear, everything that we sense and feel. It's all sensory, and the sensory side of things molds who we are. And it was just interesting when you just said that. It made me think of, with the lockdown side of things, how very quickly you can condition and train people. Because I don't know if you've heard of, in psychology, Pavlov's dogs. Yep. So what Pavlov used to do is, remember, so he'd ring the bell and then the dogs would survey from that. And in a sense, if you think of the conditioning, when, especially if you're in Victoria and you've had that lockdown, and so you're constantly conditioning, isn't there? You know the time that the premiere is going to come on, and then everything is revolved around that, and it either will dictate a good day or a bad day depending on the numbers. And you can see how very quickly we can be conditioned like that. So if we can be conditioned very quickly like that, we know that your brain with neuroplasticity has the ability to kind of decondition. So if you're feeling really flat and just, you know, not great at the moment. We know that everyone's got this amazing mind and body, and we can adapt and change, just having those skills to do it.
So Heidi, if people want to know a little bit more about somatics and the courses that you run, whereabouts do they go to?
So I've got a website, and it's totalsomatics.com. And if you look at that website, you'll see there's lots of things on there. I have a podcast series, and so you can either listen to it directly off that website, or you can go to Spotify or Apple and look there. And basically the podcast series is called Somatic Movement and Mindset. So I talk about all things mindset, brain training, pain perception, all sorts of things. So there's that. But also on totalsomatics.com, I've got a free ebook. And also the main thing is that I have a membership site. So people can join. It's a monthly membership. They can cancel at any time. But within the membership, there are instructional videos. There are audio classes. There are what else? Tutorials. I've got podcasts, and I collaborate with a lot of practitioners and experts around the world. So I've got a naturopathic doctor that also is within the online program, and we're looking at inflammation and food and joint health and all sorts of things. But every single month for all the members, I hold a live Zoom workshop. And it's like a PowerPoint presentation. So I go into the nitty gritty of things such as like fascia, or we look at brain health. And then the second half of that workshop, we integrate that by getting on the floor and doing somatic movement. So all of that is recorded and it's uploaded to the online program, so people can just watch it at their leisure. So I've had that website for about 5 years, but it's just so topical now because people are starting to notice more about their mental and physical health and how they tie in together.
Absolutely. Well, once again, Heidi, it's been a delight to have you on our Connect show today. So thank you once again. And for those at home, thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
Have you considered becoming a certified specialist? It's a tangible marker that your services meet nationally recognised standards of excellence, enabling the public to make informed choices when looking for a massage therapist or myotherapist. The opportunity to become a certified specialist is open to all therapists nationally. For more information, visit massagemyotherapy.com.au/certification.
Hello from Associated Bodywork and Massage Professionals, the leading association for massage therapists in the United States. I'm Leslie Young, and I'm ABMP's International Ambassador. I'm so excited about our new partnership with Massage and Myotherapy Australia. Now, MMA members can join as ABMP Associate members at a deep discount and access more than 200 hours of online continuing education and other member benefits. So for more information, visit abmp.com/MMA. Together, we look forward to supporting you and your career.